They are the sons of the angel, the blooded host, the defenders of humanity. They are strength, they are nobility, they are the blood angels, and I say to you, there are no more loyal or determined servants of the Emperor alive today. High Lord Baldus Bile, to Ordo Astartes Inquisitor Nazalkin. The Blood Angels are one of the 21st founding legions of the Space Marines, initially known as the 9th Legion before the second founding divided the Legiones Astartes into chapters of 1,000 Space Marines each. Renowned across the galaxy for their ferocity in battle, the Blood Angels are also feared for the curse of their flawed gene seed. They are among the longest living of the Adeptus Astartes, with some of their warriors serving the Emperor of Mankind for over 1,000 standard years. Recently, the Blood Angels have faced severe losses, bringing them to the brink of extinction. To quickly rebuild their ranks, they requested a tithe of neophytes, or candidate Space Marines, from their successor chapters. The arrival of the Primaris Space Marines during the Indomitus Crusade further bolstered their numbers, though the chapter still faces unprecedented trials. The Blood Angels are the noble descendants of the most puissant and angelic of the Primarchs, Sanguinius. They are one of the most celebrated chapters in the Imperium, with their countless heroic deeds and victories known to untold billions of the Emperor's subjects. The angelic visages of their heroes adorn Gothic facades and stained glass windows in countless holy basilicas, and their portraits are cherished in illuminated tomes. Yet the Blood Angels harbour a terrible curse. When their beloved Primarch was slain by the arch-traitor Horus during the Horus heresy, every Blood Angel was doomed to share a portion of the pain inflicted upon Sanguinius. From that day, every Blood Angel has been tormented by visions of their Primarch's last moments. As they age, these waking nightmares become more frequent and debilitating. If they do not fall in battle, every Blood Angel will eventually be consumed by these soul-searing visions, descending into a madness where they endlessly witness the death of Sanguinius, powerless to intervene. The inevitability of their curse ennobles the Blood Angels, driving them to seek a glorious death in the name of the Emperor and their Primarch. Despite the dark urgings to shed the blood of their enemies, the Blood Angels have remained pure and noble for 10,000 years. However, the chapter is slowly dying. As more of its brethren succumb to the red thirst, the overwhelming desire to rend limb from limb those responsible for Sanguinius's death, and by extension, every enemy of the Emperor. The death of Sanguinius is one of the most tragic moments of the Horus heresy, for he was slain by his brother Primarch, Horus. Some believe that Sanguinius's sacrifice weakened the War Master enough for the Emperor to later defeat him at the climax of the Siege of Terra. The Blood Angels continue to mourn this loss deeply, feeling the pain keenly as Sanguinius's blood still courses through their veins. In battle, the Blood Angels are gripped by a fury born of their Primarch's final moments. For some, the thirst becomes too great, leading them to be overtaken by the Black Rage, cursed to relive Sanguinius's death over and over again until their end. The illustrious sons of Sanguinius are celebrated throughout the Imperium, their greatest heroes immortalized in marble, oil paintings and tapestries adorning 1,000,000 cloisters. Their angel-winged Primarch, Sanguinius, is venerated on countless worlds, his perfect visage gazing down with a mix of benevolence and pity. As the heirs of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels deliver death from above to the enemies of the Emperor. The chapter strives for perfection in all it does, excelling in one particular form of warfare above all others. While all chapters of the Adeptus Astartes are masters of drop-pod and thunderhawk assaults, the Blood Angels have become synonymous with the flawless execution of aerial assaults. They utilize a unique vehicle of mysterious origin, the Storm Raven gunship. This vessel, a lighter cousin of the Thunderhawk, compensates for its smaller size and reduced weaponry with superior speed and maneuverability. The Blood Angels quickly recognized the value of the Storm Raven gunship and incorporated it into their arsenal, even as the Adeptus Mechanicus took centuries to examine and debate its standard template construct imprint. The chapter's forge perfected its fabrication methods, allowing the gunship to be deployed throughout their entire force. While other Astartes chapters are just beginning to integrate the Storm Raven, the Blood Angels have already mastered its use, refining aerial assault tactics that others are only starting to learn. The Blood Angels' doctrine of aerial assault culminates in savage close combat. Whether delivered into battle by Thunderhawk or Storm Raven gunship, or in the troop bay of a Rhino, Razorback or Land Raider, the Blood Angels are nearly unmatched in their mastery of close assault. This proficiency is partly due to the gene seed of Sanguinius, which grants his sons an exceptionally long lifespan even for Space Marines, allowing endless solar hours of practice and countless battles to hone their skills to perfection. However, the Blood Angels are driven to close combat by more than just tactical necessity or battlefield doctrine. The chapter's reliance on blood and the need to cleanse it to keep the flaw at bay exerts an irresistible hold on the Blood Angels. In battle, they are drawn to spill the blood of their foes, and their ordinarily noble demeanor can transform into twisted, rage-fueled savagery. This is known as the Red Thirst, a condition every Blood Angel experiences. For many, the Red Thirst is a prelude to the ultimate expression of the flaw, the Black Rage, where the state becomes permanent and all-consuming. The Blood Angels and their successor chapters, collectively known as the Sanguinary Brotherhood, are unique in that their gene seed imposes an unusual and ultimately tragic flaw upon each battle brother. For most chapters, service begins as a neophyte, with the initiate advancing through the ranks based on survival and battlefield prowess, eventually attaining command of a company, a specialist role such as a chaplain, or even the position of chapter master. The Blood Angels, however, undergo a different journey, one rarely understood by outsiders. They possess an almost supernaturally noble, saintly countenance, with features that are handsome and pure. This transformation is all the more remarkable considering the chapter recruits from the short, stunted men of the tribes of Baal, who suffer from stigmata, lesions and carcinoma caused by radiation poisoning. Their dramatic metamorphosis into saintly neophytes is made possible by arcane blood rites. Over a lifespan far exceeding that of the average Astartes, a Blood Angel hones his skills, but with each battle, the flaw's influence grows stronger, and the urge to spill hot, steaming blood intensifies. As this urge intensifies, the battle brother is driven to spend longer periods purging his own blood within the crimson embrace of his transfusion casket. After centuries of service, he must spend long hours having every drop of his blood scrubbed clean. Eventually, the Blood Angel may feel the stirrings of something deeper, the rage descending not at the culmination of battle, but before it. These are the first echoes of the Black Rage. While most Blood Angels fall in combat before succumbing to it, those who cannot resist are forced to join the chapter's infamous Death Company. Fate is a merciless master, and no matter how his prey might struggle, no matter the heights they reach or the trials they conquer, he will eventually bring them down. The Blood Angels fought against the destiny inscribed in their genes, defied the role the Emperor had chosen for them, and dared to believe they could overcome the darkness shadowing them. They transformed the worst of mankind into something radiant and true, rising above their origins to stand as the guardian angels of the fledgling Imperium. However, within their triumphs lay the seeds of their downfall, nurtured by the envy of the fallen War Master Horus, who saw in them everything he had forsaken. The initial blow of the Horus heresy brought the Blood Angels to their knees, and the ensuing tragedies shattered their resolve and left them broken. Yet the nature of the Ninth Legion ensured that they did not succumb to despair or darkness, but rose again and again. What might Sanguinius and his sons have achieved were it not for the dark fate cast upon them by treachery and genetics? What magnificent bloom could have emerged from their bloody origins? That unrealized future is yet another casualty of Horus's civil war, leaving the Blood Angels to endure the slow decay of their noble lineage with the stubborn pride that defines them. There are many noble legends of the Unification Wars, recounting the battles where the Emperor's newborn Space Marine legions swept aside all who opposed him. Among these tales, none mention the Ninth Legion, only grim rumors and half-heard whispers. While the first companies of other proto-legions fought in Albia, Indonesia and France, Alongside the massed ranks of the Thunder Warriors, the Ninth Legion was absent, given a role both vital and unsightly. The old Ninth Legions served the Emperor as an inferno serves a general on the battlefield. They did not conquer but ravaged, growing as they went, a weapon that could not be directed or controlled, only endured. Few in number, the early Space Marine legions fought as mere vanguards to larger forces, a sharp dagger alongside the blunt sledgehammer of the armies of unification. They were the pivot on which battles turned, waging small-scale battles by precision strike and audacious raids. The Ninth Legion was cast in a different mould. Even in their earliest days they were among the largest of the proto-legions, and when they waged war, it was like the sudden arrival of a tsunami, sweeping away opposition with brutal assaults. They were deployed to the most dangerous war zones of Terra, to those cursed regions ravaged by the radphages and chem strains of old night, places where only the most twisted and debased breeds of mankind still lived. In the wastelands beyond history's spotlight, they held the line, alone and unnoticed, while the Emperor pursued his grand conquests. This grim fate was no accident, no arbitrary choice by a distant general, for each legion was granted genetic tools to fit their roles by the Emperor, and the Ninth Legion was no exception. While other legions took only the best recruits, princes and champions among the conquered techno-barbarian nations of old Earth, and produced few initiates, the Ninth Legion accepted the hordes of dispossessed and broken, transforming them into an army of angels. Scarred by countless generations, mired in the rad zones and sunken fortresses of Terra's poisoned wilds, these beings had become more monstrous than human, twisted and mutated by the tyrants of old Earth who hunted them down. Yet from these lowly origins emerged a breed of Legiones Astartes, who were uniformly tall and fair, their features sculpted with stern elegance. The unique genetic template of the Ninth Legion's unknown sire seemed to favour the twisted and warped, inflicting immense pain on those inducted into the Legion, a trial few could withstand. Only those who had survived the horrific rad zones and poisons for years endured the process to become Astartes of the Ninth Legion, resulting in a limited number of recruits. However, unlike other legions, the Ninth cast their net wide, claiming entire tribes of wastelanders, prisoners of war, and a long train of hopefuls seeking the miracle of transformation. The bloody-handed apothecaries worked tirelessly, wielding their knives without rest to maintain the Legion's fighting strength in even the most hellish war zones. Though the legend of the Ninth languished, its ranks did not dwindle. As their numbers grew, so did the dark rumours surrounding them, for the Emperor's legacy had bestowed upon them other, darker gifts. These gifts earned them a new epithet among the Emperor's mortal armies, the Eaters of the Dead. After each battle, the elegant forms of the Ninth Legion haunted the field long after the fighting had ceased, seeking out the finest among the fallen and consuming their flesh and blood. Many victories that brought unification to old Earth were marred by the sight of blood-smeared angels stalking the fallen and wounded enemy champions across corpse-choked fields. Few among their detractors understood the purpose of this grim fixation. This too was part of the Emperor's grand design. Through the genetic augmentations that transformed them, the Ninth Legion could steal their enemies' power, genetically absorbing their knowledge and skill through their homophagia implants by consuming the foe's bodily tissues. In the desolate battlefields where they fought, often isolated and far from aid, this trait provided the Ninth Legion with priceless information, making even the rawest recruits battle-ready. Yet their macabre reputation clung to them like a shroud, overshadowing their achievements. Created to fight monsters alone in the darkest places, they risked becoming more foul than the creatures they fought. As the wars of unification swept through the Sol system like a storm, so did the Ninth Legion. Despite being one of the largest early legions, bolstered by widespread recruiting during the War for Old Earth, the Ninth found no place among the hosts assaulting the Jovian moons or the resource-rich inner worlds during the early Great Crusade. Instead, their flag was planted among the artificial moons of baleful Neptune, whose labyrinthine tunnels and dark halls were the lairs of Xenos raiders and the last genetically debased human colonists of that distant outpost. There was little to gain here but time, precious time for the Emperor to claim the orbital shipyards of Saturn and the allegiance of Mars, for which he needed the raiders and mutants of the outer worlds held in check. To that end, he sent the 9th Legion forth to die. 12,000 warriors of the 9th Legion, all seasoned veterans of the Terra Wars, vanished on the moons of Neptune. As the Emperor and his grand armies subdued Saturn, Mars, and the inner worlds, no word came from the 9th Legion, leaving their fate a mystery. By the time these conquests were finished and the Emperor turned his attention to the outer system, most expected to find only frozen corpses. However, upon reaching Neptune, they discovered the 9th Legion alive and well. Despite losing many of their original number, the force's size remained nearly the same, bolstered by recruits from Neptune's barely human population. Where others might have faltered, the 9th Legion had only grown stronger, rising like a bloody phoenix from the ashes of defeat. In those tumultuous days, the Legion was a constantly evolving force, primarily composed of line infantry geared for the brutal chaos of close-quarters combat. This was a role in which the 9th Legion excelled, always preferring sudden, overwhelming charges to protracted battles of attrition. They understood the power of their fearsome reputation in war, often staging attacks at dusk or dawn, and adorning their storm-grey Mark II power armor with macabre imagery. They frequently fought unhelmed, their angelic faces streaked with blood to unsettle their enemies. Some companies even incorporated the Legion's secret bloody rituals into their battle doctrines, tearing apart foes on the battlefield or indulging in bloody feasts to break enemy morale and incite panic. Time and again, the 9th Legion was cast into the crucible of destruction, emerging each time as strong as before. They took what they needed from the enemy to continue fighting, and found victory where others saw only defeat and despair, though it left them changed. On the silent black battlefields of the Kuiper Belt and the endless wastes of rust, the 9th Legion fought and survived where others could not, holding the line in the Great Crusade's early uncertain steps. Malcador the Sigillite took note of their exploits and dubbed them the Revenant Legion, a title reflecting both the superstitious awe they inspired and a commendation of their bravery. The Sigillite was just one of many senior officials in the early Imperium's Divisio Militaris who felt uneasy with this incarnation of the Legiones Astartes. They lacked the prestige and open popularity of their brethren, such as the celebrated 8th Legion or Horus's own 16th Legion. A dangerous and unsightly weapon to be unsheathed only in dire need and then quickly hidden away, the 9th Legion often found themselves alongside other less favoured legions. With the savage warhounds and the oft-forgotten 4th Legion, they shared a bitter kinship, though it was rare to see these legions assembled together. Yet it was the efforts of these ingloriously practical and blood-stained warriors that laid the foundations of the Imperium. Few songs are sung in praise of their deeds, but their contributions were vital to the golden empire the Emperor sought to build. Again and again, the pride of the 9th Legion was shattered on the battlefield, yet their records consistently highlight the same few warriors and champions. Some remembrancers and historians have interpreted this as evidence of a long tradition of heroic figures, compiling these records into epic stanzas that form a single legendary narrative. However, the true reason for the recurring names in the 9th Legion's battle records is far less noble. From its inception, the 9th Legion fought in the most extreme conditions, adopting practices born out of sheer necessity that might otherwise be seen as monstrous. One such practice, influenced by their unique genetic makeup and the harsh environments they endured, was the consumption of fallen captains by their followers, to preserve their accumulated skills and experience. As both an honor and a practical measure, it became customary for new recruits to take the names of those whose abilities they had absorbed, and for lieutenants to adopt the names of their fallen captains. The resemblance among the 9th Legion's members was so striking that outsiders often failed to notice this subtle form of immortality. The most notable example is Isidore Ossuros, believed to have served as the Ninth Legion's first and only master, other than Sanguinius himself. Historical records suggest that Isidore commanded the Ninth from the Unification Wars to the discovery of Baal in the year 843 of the 30th millennium, but closer examination reveals that the name died numerous times, only to be assumed by another warrior. Over countless battles, this practice became an honoured tradition within the Legion, a visceral ritual that bound the survivors together despite their diverse origins. Yet, as much as it united the Ninth Legion internally, it also distanced them from their allies in the Imperial Army and other legions. In the years before Sanguinius's return, several Primarchs expressed disdain for the Ninth Legion's practices, though they could not argue with their battlefield success. This legacy of mistrust and barbarism was a burden the Ninth carried, imposed upon them by the brutal necessities of their mission. In the early years of the Great Crusade, as the Emperor's fleets ventured beyond the Segmentum Solar into wilderness space, they encountered battlefields that could shatter the sanity of mortal men. Among these dreadful places, termed zones mortalis in the formal language of the Divisio Militaris, none were more horrifying than the world known to history as Kiburan. The first expeditions to Kiburan disappeared without a trace, with 4 full regiments of the Imperial Army's Veredan regulars swallowed up, leaving a flank of the Crusades' galaxy-wide advance exposed. In response, the Emperor deployed his own terrors to confront whatever beasts lurked there. 3 companies of the Ninth Legion's Astartes were dispatched to Kiburan ahead of the expeditionary fleets to support the Veredan regulars. The world was a wasteland of irradiated sands, inhabited by degenerate mutant tribes and ruled by the techno-barbarian warlord Eclobia. These tribes not only engaged in relentless conflict but also used each other as a primary food source, sustained by a brutal economy of ritual bloodshed and cannibalism. It was these mutants that the beleaguered Imperial Army troops encountered, their ranks decimated by hordes of barely human mutants armed with primitive clubs and picks. The corpses of the fallen were hauled back to flickering fire pits to be cooked by night. For 3 solar months, the trenches of the Imperial Army repelled the mindless onslaught before the storm-grey drop pods of the Ninth Legion descended from the sky, wreathed in black smoke. Crashing to the ground, the Revenant Legion broke through the mutant throng with contemptuous ease, relieving the embattled Veredan troopers. The Ninth Legion attacked the cantonments of local tribes, their superior arms and armour allowing them to seize control of the northern mountain ranges, casting out the indigenous mutants with uncompromising brutality. In the initial phase of the Ninth Legion's campaign on Kiburan, they encountered little organised resistance, freely conquering territory. For several solar months, the Ninth Legion ravaged Kiburan until news reached warlord Eclobia, who swore an oath to eradicate the invaders. Eclobia commanded an army of mutant chattel whose numbers were beyond count and over whom he wielded such terrifying power that they would throw themselves to their deaths rather than face the horrors unleashed by his enslaved sorcerers. As the Ninth Legion crossed into Eclobia's territories, the resistance from indigenous forces intensified until the Ninth was drawn into full-scale battle. Initially, they easily quashed any bands of savages striking at the edges of their line, but these soon became an unending deluge of bodies, threatening to overwhelm and encircle the 3 companies. The Ninth Legion braced themselves to repel the tide of mutants, whose hideous deformities allowed them to rend ceramite with their tortured flesh, and whose sheer numbers caused the earth to tremble at their approach. Though the Legiones Astartes fought valiantly, each battle-brother taking down scores of enemies, the overwhelming numbers of the foe gradually forced them to retreat. In an attempt to regroup, the 3 companies of the Ninth Legion formed a spearhead, aiming to break through the mutants and reach the distant banner poles that marked the position of the Horde's brutish commander. As the spearhead of the Legion formation neared Eclobia's encampment, the horrors of Old Night were unleashed, Reality rippled and tore as the cracked skulls ensorcelled chattel summoned indescribable horrors, causing massive casualties among both the Astartes and the mutant horde, shifting the battle's tide. Unable to combat such a threat, the 9th Legion warriors faced the choice of retreat or total annihilation, a decision that might have doomed other, more honor-bound legions, but not the pragmatic Revenant Legion of old. The legionaries turned and carved a bloody path through the throng with toothless chainswords, broken blades, and fragments of their fallen comrades' armor. Nearly 2 companies were lost in that monumental battle, leaving the survivors to question how they could endure without reinforcement or resupply. The staggering losses necessitated a reorganization of Legion resources among the remaining 380 legionaries, reflecting the utilitarian and consequentialist nature of the early 9th Legion's psyche. Key to their survival, the Apothecarian was reformed and expanded into a combat support formation, ensuring the propagation of gene seed and the survival of the remaining legionaries. Reforged in the crucible of war, far from the path of the Great Crusade, the orphaned companies of the 9th Legion resumed their campaign at a more measured pace. They conducted squad-based shock assaults on enemy encampments before withdrawing to avoid organized reprisals. The campaign soon stagnated into a pattern of thrust and counter-thrust, a war fought on the back foot to bleed the foe while being hugely outnumbered. This conflict, later known as the Banquet of Kiburan, raged on for 12 standard years, largely forgotten by the wider Imperium. The 9th Legion dismantled the world's tribes piece by piece through brutal close-quarters combat, avoiding full-scale engagements. In the early years of this desperate struggle, with no resupply in sight, the 9th Legion adopted practical measures for survival. Raids against local mutant tribes on the northern continent became acts of domination rather than destruction. These mutants, if useful, were pressed into the Legion's service. The hardiness of the 9th Legion's gene seed allowed even these irradiated and grotesquely mutated beings to be suitable candidates for induction into the Legion. Their children, once bred as mere meat stock for their techno-barbarian overlord, were transformed into angelic warriors through the implantation of Sanguinius's gene seed. Additionally, the Legion's apothecaries encouraged the practice of cannibalizing the war dead for sustenance, benefiting the Legion while denying resources to the enemy. These strategies enabled the 9th to replenish its ranks and continue without contact with the wider Imperium, a feat unmatched by any other legion. Through this strategy, the Legion steadily took ground from Eclobia, depleting his armies and food supply, while using these resources to rebuild their own strength. However, the Legion's methods may have gone too far in the name of survival. A diary recovered from the equipment of a missing officer of the Veredan regulars refers to the 9th as the Charnel Feast, a name that became popular among the rank-and-file mortal soldiery of the Great Crusade before being suppressed with Sanguinius's arrival. The same diary hints at a grim fate for the 46th Veredan regulars, suggesting they were used to sustain the Legion either through literal consumption or by providing the flesh needed by the charnel priests, what had become of their apothecarian, to create new warriors. Other recovered journals claim that the populace of Kiburan viewed the legionaries as devils from their myths, stealing children and feasting on corpses in a manner more barbaric than even their masters' ritual cannibalism. The native population feared that their own magic had unleashed the Imperium of mankind, speaking of it in hushed tones as the force of their own undoing. In the 12th Terran year after planetfall, the final battle was inevitable. Eclobia, weakened by years of starvation and surrounded in his fortress spaceport by a replenished force of nearly 1,000 legionaries and their degenerate serfs, attempted once more to unleash his slave sorcerers. The massed, unarmored novitiates of the Legion, recruited from among the tribes of Kiburan, bore the brunt of the attack, while the off-world veterans of the Legion made targeted strikes against the warlocks, overwhelming the warlord's defences with sheer numbers. With his sorcerers dead and his fortress in ruins, Eclobia attempted to flee in a primitive spacecraft, only to be intercepted by a squadron of Imperial cruisers bearing the heraldry of the 7th Legion in orbit. His life ended under their guns. The Imperium had finally come to reclaim its warriors, expecting to find a world brought to compliance and ready to accept the Emperor's law. Leading the fleet, Rogel Dawn, newly reunited with his Imperial fists, arrived on Kiburan to discover a ruined world of the Imperium's making. Furious at the report of the Ninth Legion's actions, he refused to accept the compliance of Kiburan as the dream of Imperium his father had envisioned. In the charnel feast, Dawn saw monstrous misdeeds, but also the resourcefulness of capable warriors in desperate circumstances. Reprimanding the surviving Ninth Legion warriors for their questionable judgment, the Praetorian of Terra ordered the city of Buran razed and burned, erasing the sins of the Ninth Legion before any remembrancer could set foot there. With each triumph, the ominous legends surrounding the Ninth Legion grew and spread. They became the spectres, haunting the wild fringes of the Great Crusade's advance, the terrors unleashed by the Emperor to forge his path across the stars. It was a role and title they accepted with grim pride, never shirking the mantle they bore in his name and never balking at the tasks assigned to them. Every campaign was conducted with a cold fury that set them apart from the Emperor's other attack dogs and hidden assassins. Their quiet, brooding hunger for blood and death was as terrifying as it was effective. Once committed to battle, the Ninth did not relent, did not retreat, and could not be stopped. They fought until the enemy was completely annihilated, ignoring thoughts of mercy or the need to build an empire rather than a graveyard. Few among the mighty and renowned welcomed their presence on the eve of battle, for the stench of death and madness clung to them. Without a patron among the returning Primarchs to guide them and give purpose to their conflicts, the Ninth Legion slipped further into isolation and infamy. The Legion became a strange blend of Imperial doctrine and crimson ritual, its ranks filled with charnel cults and bloody prophets of war, the superstitions of countless worlds given power by the nature of their transformation and left to fester on the worst battlefields of the Great Crusade. Worse still, the sight of these blood-soaked angels, tall and striking, perhaps even more so when covered in battlefield gore, often led those they conquered to worship them, fearing to anger the red angels that had come. It was a descent into madness that threatened the very existence of the Legion. Unchecked, they would become a greater danger to the Imperium than the monsters they were created to hunt. The seeds of this destruction were already sown. Many watched the Legion and its commanders with growing suspicion, distrustful of the immortal Ninth and its blood-soaked killers. The Ninth Legion's 14th Company was sanctioned by Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists for its actions during the Second Siege of Yarant, where the Ninth Legion's warriors took to killing and consuming prisoners on the fortress walls to demoralize the enemy and secure intelligence. While the Imperial army lodged a grievance against the Ninth Legion after reports emerged that mortally wounded soldiers of the Malagant Rifles Regiment had been slaughtered and drained of their blood by the Legion during the retreat from Shedim, rather than left to the mercy of the enemy. Such brutal actions seemed of little concern to the Ninth Legion, but added weight to the arguments of those who claimed they should share the fate of the two other failed legions. Fragmented by the demands of war and the needs of the Great Crusade, the Ninth Legion became outcasts among the brotherhood of the Space Marine legions. They fought in small, isolated companies, each fostering its own distinct version of the red cults that had spread throughout the Legion. Their force remained largely composed of line infantry and jump troops, not for tactical reasons, but because the Divisio Militaris was reluctant to supply them with more potent arms and munitions. In response, the Legion increasingly relied on its own macabre methods to win battles, valuing victory more than the respect of their peers. Their bitter pride in what they perceived as the jealousy of others sustained them, but also dragged them further into disrepute. The Ninth Legion teetered on a knife's edge. They were still a necessary, albeit bloody, part of the Emperor's plan to conquer the galaxy, yet that conquest would not last forever. Eventually the Ninth would become more of a burden in the new Golden Age the Emperor sought to build than a blessing. A reckoning loomed for the Ninth Legion. They would either be reborn anew, changed and not diminished as they had been before, or they would be ended and erased from history. At this critical juncture, a scout flotilla of the Great Crusade discovered an otherwise insignificant world of ruins and deserts, a world whose moons had their own legends of a bloody angel, a world called Baal. After the Emperor created the Primarchs, the ruinous powers absconded with the infant demigods while they were still in their gestation capsules, carrying them through the warp. Though unable to destroy the Primarchs due to the Emperor's potent psychic and physical protections, the demonic powers did their utmost to pervert the Emperor's creations to their own nefarious ends. Thus, even the finest of the Emperor's works were tainted from the very beginning. The gestation pod housing the infant Sanguinius ultimately landed on the moon of Baal Secundus, in a place now known as Angel's Fall. Of the young Primarchs stolen from the Emperor and spirited away through the Imperium, few found themselves in conditions that could be considered fair. Among them, Sanguinius was particularly ill-favoured by his fate. Once a thriving hub of mankind's ancient interstellar empire, the Baal system had been reduced to a radiation-scorched wasteland of ash and dust due to its people's folly during the Age of Strife. On Baal Secundus, where Primarch Sanguinius was cast adrift, a fragile remnant of humanity eked out an existence. These feral, warlike post-apocalyptic tribes survived in the wastelands through war, plunder, and scant foraging from the deserts. Sanguinius spent his earliest days in the deep desert, and little is known of this period, for he never spoke of it in later years. Undoubtedly he endured hardships that would have killed full-grown men, slew mutant creatures of the wasteland that even the desert tribes avoided, and survived the radiation that would have incinerated mortal flesh in mere minutes. The length of Sanguinius' sojourns alone in the wastelands remains unknown, but by the time a tribe of Baal Secundus discovered him, he was a young boy, almost of age by the tribesmen's standards. Sanguinius' life nearly ended then and there, for great white wings, akin to those of an angel, had emerged from his back. Whether Sanguinius' wings were a result of Baal's mutagenic influence on his post-human genome, an effect of his journey through the warp, or part of the Emperor's deliberate design, remains a mystery known only to the master of mankind. Among the tribesmen who discovered the Primarch, many initially wanted to kill the child, mistaking him for a mutant. However, in all other aspects he appeared as a perfectly formed human child. Eventually, compassion prevailed and the child was spared. Sanguinius quickly adapted to his new life among the tribe, as was typical of his kind in similar situations. His strength and resilience soon earned him a place within the tribe known as the People of the Blood, or simply the Blood, like all the tribes of Baal. The young Sanguinius was a prodigy, growing swiftly and absorbing everything his adoptive parents could teach him. It is said that even as a child, he killed a giant fire scorpion with his bare hands, showing no fear in the face of the colossal beast. As Sanguinius grew, so did his wings, becoming mighty pinions capable of bearing him aloft on the desert air. He could walk without a radsuit in Baal Secundus's most poisonous deserts, and could shatter massive boulders with a single blow of his outstretched hand. He soon excelled his teachers in the use of all weapons. When a wandering band of feral mutants attacked the tribe, Sanguinius killed them all, though they numbered over 100. This was the first time the Blood had seen him truly angry, for he felt his comrades' lives were in danger. When the blood rage overtook him, Sanguinius was indeed terrible to behold. His mighty Primarch powers awoke to their full extent, and a nimbus of light played about his head. He grew to manhood rapidly, troubled by dreams and ill portents of death and blood and the arrival of a grim and unknown king from other worlds. He fought against the mutated subhuman creatures that prowled the deep desert and the raiders from other tribes with the same single-minded focus he gave to his loyalty to his new people, the Blood. Unlike the other Primarchs, there was no long war of planetary unification on Baal Secundus, no glorious campaign of conquest to prove the young demigod's worth. The legend of the winged warrior spread across Baal, telling of a tall, fair warrior, unlike the stunted, radiation-scarred people of the moon. Ferocious in war and wise in peace, he seemed a vision of past glories returned to Baal, a promise for the future that had been all but forgotten among the Blood. Despite Sanguinius's denials, he became a godlike figure to his foster people, and warriors from across the wide desert came to fight at his side. Under his guidance, they pushed back the mutant tide, giving humanity a respite on Baal Secundus. Within a few short Baalite years, each an endless scorching summer, a vast host gathered at the great angel's side, seeking to learn from his words and to shelter beneath his wings. He became the master of his world, not by force or conquest, but by the acclamation of a desperate people. Baal was a world long dead, its landscape reduced to ruins and radiation-blasted wastelands by the forgotten wars of old night. The initial expeditionary fleets had bypassed it as a target for the Great Crusade, because despite its location along a major stable warp current, it held no real industrial value and had only a sparse population. Yet it was here in the year 843 of the 30th millennium that the Emperor would rediscover one of his lost sons, the Primarch Sanguinius. Like many of the Primarchs, Sanguinius had forged a bloody peace on his adopted homeworld, shaping the primitive tribes he found there according to his ideals. His legacy was one of peaceful conquest tempered with justice and knowledge, a stark contrast to the path taken by the Ninth Legion that would soon be his. Thus, when the Emperor came for his missing son, and starships once again filled the skies of Baal, it was not to find a king of battle and war, but an unwilling god. Having long foreseen his father's arrival and the many consequences it would bring, Sanguinius met the Emperor alone, without the entourage of worshippers or the warriors sworn to his service. Alone, he knelt before his father and asked only for the lives of his followers, fearing the wrath of a man who had vowed to topple all religions. Seeing in the winged Primarch a servant of rare talents and unwavering loyalty, the Emperor granted his wish. The imperial truth was withheld from Baal, and no imperial ship would set down on the second moon of Baal again, except at the behest of Sanguinius himself. The blood would continue to live as they always had, partly as a surety against the great angel's pact. Sanguinius departed to begin his service to the Emperor. Sanguinius was to learn the art of war at the side of Horus, accompanying the Primarch and his lunar wolves to understand how battles were fought among the stars and to grasp the workings of the vast Imperium that the Emperor was constructing. As Sanguinius developed a bond of trust with his mentor and brother, the Ninth Legion was finally summoned to meet their new and rightful master. Scattered across distant war zones, it took many solar months to locate and recall each band of the Ninth Legion. The gathering took 2 standard years and 4 solar months to complete, culminating on the storm-ravaged world of Terra. There, an army of grim killers with angelic faces assembled, eager for a new conflict. The captains of the Revenant Legion, known as the Great Crusade's blood-soaked angels, gathered as Stormbird transports bearing the mark of the lunar wolves descended from orbit. From within emerged warriors, clad in the white of Horus's own legion. Yet the figure leading them was not Horus. By his stature, it was clear he was a true son of the Emperor, one of the Primarchs. Great white wings unfolded as Sanguinius revealed himself to his gene sons, his sculpted features mirroring those around him. He beheld the assembled warriors of the Ninth, each bearing the scars of relentless battle both on their proud faces and deep within their spirits. These were not men to be impressed by the pomp and ceremony of his escort, nor by mere strength of arms. Amid the rain and storms of that far-off world, the winged Primarch took a knee before the rough-cast killers and scarred blood-drinkers. Rather than demand their allegiance, he offered them his own. The warriors, who had given everything to the new Imperium and received only scorn and mistrust in return, were now offered a Primarch's loyalty, given freely and without reservation. Sanguinius won their devotion with his actions. To seal their bond, he led the assembled legion on their first campaign together, standing in the front lines of battle where his valor demonstrated the sincerity of his pledge. The storm-ravaged 5th planet of the Tegar system, Tegar Pentorus, was the battlefield where Sanguinius fought to earn the loyalty of his legion. In the chaos of combat, he shed his blood and came to understand the true nature of his sons. Sanguinius observed the bloodlust and eerie hunger that permeated his legion's core, recognizing it as a reflection of his own inner darkness. The abhuman hordes of Terra and their bestial thralls were cut down by the Ninth Legion like wheat before a scythe, with Sanguinius himself claiming the pelt of a dire Carnarvon as a trophy and a symbol of his bond with his sons. Amid the gore-soaked aftermath of the campaign, Sanguinius glimpsed a potential future, a crimson future of endless war, where his sons would become true monsters, enslaved by a dark and terrible fury. Yet the winged Primarch did not succumb to despair. Even in the heat of battle, the warriors of the Ninth Legion retained a spark of nobility, the lingering embers of their martial pride and determination. They fought not just for slaughter, but to seize the elusive prize of victory, adhering to their own codes of honor with unyielding resolve. These virtues would be Sanguinius's weapons in the battle for the Ninth Legion's soul, the tools with which he would elevate them. Sanguinius understood that no future was set in stone, that no dark fate was beyond hope of redemption. At the conclusion of the battle for Terra, he declared, "Even though a darkness hangs over them, a future soaked in blood and horror, they are angels yet, angels of blood." The Ninth Legion, once known as the Revenant Legion, had been reborn and earned a new name, the Blood Angels. The newly named Blood Angels did not return in full force to Baal, as that scorching wasteland had little to offer that the ruins of Terra and countless other dead worlds hadn't already taught them. Instead, Sanguinius sought the assistance of his brother Horus, who had been his mentor and friend during his initial years in the Emperor's Grand Army. Sanguinius divided his legion, now bearing new heraldry to honor their Primarch and reflect their new name, and assigned each company to fight alongside one of Horus's Lunar Wolves companies. For the next decade, the Blood Angels fought alongside these renowned warriors, witnessing the fall of countless worlds and engaging in a variety of campaigns, from straightforward wars of extermination to the nuanced strategies of strike-and-fade operations. In the shadow of the Lunar Wolves and under the guidance of the greatest of the Emperor's Primarchs, the once outcast Ninth Legion gained respect from their peers and developed a newfound sense of decorum. Every campaign served as a trial, a subtle test devised by Sanguinius and Horus to heal the wounds time and fate had inflicted on the Blood Angels. Sanguinius instilled in his sons a new sense of pride, not in sheer carnage and endless melee, but in a future where they stood as exemplars of the Imperial Creed, equal to Horus's own warriors. During the year-long siege of Anaxis XII, they learned the value of brotherhood, as they stood alongside the Imperial fists against an endless tide of Hrud. On Cambriol and Prehult, they were taught discipline as they clashed with inscrutable Aeldari Reavers, and on Centaurus Beta, they learned mercy as Sanguinius led them through the bloodless pacification of the Centauran colonies. With each battle, the Legion shed part of the stigma of their past and began to tread a new path. Determined to be worthy of Sanguinius's oath, the warriors of the Ninth Legion worked to set aside the gore-soaked isolation that had once been their source of pride and embrace the new virtues their Primarch had shown them. With fury tempered by wisdom and blood hunger restrained by discipline, the Ninth Legion, when they finally returned to Baal, were no longer the rough beasts that had once stalked Terra. They had transformed into a legion reborn, embodying the nobility befitting their angel-winged sire. On the sands of Baal, the newly raised and trained contingents of Astartes, drawn from the blood, the native people of that radiation-scorched system, joined the Blood Angels. These warriors, trained and schooled in the arts of war by Sanguinius himself, integrated with their brethren from Terra. The mixing of these two halves across the many companies of the Blood Angels aimed to strengthen each other and dilute the influence of the Ninth Legion's Terran past. The insatiable hunger lingered, a chained beast lurking at the edge of sanity, ever ready to be unleashed. However, the faith of their Primarch ensured they maintained a firm grip on its fetters. The Blood Angels honed their minds and wills, dedicating themselves to the pursuit of wisdom alongside the art of war. They evolved into scholars and warriors, shedding the barbarism of their past under the approving gaze of their winged Primarch. They sought to prove themselves worthy of the future they fought for. As time passed, the Blood Angels' dark history faded from the memories of their comrades. The blood hunger became little more than a myth, a half-remembered ghost story of ancient ghouls once bound in service to the Emperor. Those few among the Legion who succumbed to its thirst or the black fury that followed were discreetly hidden, granted the Emperor's peace, or sealed away on Baal. The Blood Angels and their Primarch joined the Great Crusade as equals, looked down upon by none, and followed the call of war to the stars. The new crimson-clad Ninth Legion was both familiar and fundamentally changed in character. They still waged war with a fury that shook the heavens, but now it was tempered with deep discipline and sharp intellect. They favored shock assaults, descending upon the enemy suddenly and without warning. However, with a Primarch's will guiding them, they utilized the full array of Imperial technology. When the angels descended, they fell from the sky like a rain of fire, 1,000 burning lights against the dawn, embodying the Emperor's wrath in crimson form. Their skills extended beyond sudden onslaughts. They mastered the feigned retreat, the gun line, and countless other stratagems. They became a fully formed legion, transcending their genetic legacy and the harsh lessons of unification. This transformation illustrated the Emperor's plan for his legions, that with their Primarchs they became whole, far more than the sum of their parts. Thus, the Great Crusade surged onward as never before. New battlefronts opened under the Primarch's direction, and thousands of worlds were reclaimed. Throughout it all, the Blood Angels and their Primarch Sanguinius fought at the Emperor's side, serving as his honor guard. Their fearsome reputation as shock troops fed a rivalry with the equally assault-oriented World Eaters Legion. Yet the Blood Angels were never as ferocious as the World Eaters, for Sanguinius's wise influence tempered their bloodlust. Of all the Primarchs, Sanguinius formed the closest bonds with Horus, Lemon Russ, and Jagatai Khan. Even in the early days of his legend, Sanguinius was regarded as the noblest of the Primarchs, ever deep in the Emperor's council. Even Horus, who would later become the proud war master of the Great Crusade, sensed a purity of spirit in Sanguinius that he could never match, a oneness with their father that no other Primarch could hope to approach. While many of his brothers fought the Great Crusade for the joy of battle, Sanguinius fought to secure the golden era of peace and prosperity that would surely follow. His vision was the Emperor's vision, a hope for mankind united in peace and prosperity. Tragically, it was not to be. Anaktor is a star system that has vanished from all Imperial maps. It is absent from any records of conquest, battle honors, or Divisio Militaris archives. Only in the great library of Terra, hidden deep beneath the Imperial Palace and within the Blood Angel's own annals, can the story of this long-forgotten battlefield be found. This tale serves as a cautionary lesson among the ranks of the crimson-clad Brotherhood, recounting an angel's rage and a legion's shame. It reveals that the divide between the old Ninth Legion and the Blood Angels is not as vast as history might suggest. Anaktor once lay within the territory traversed by the expeditionary fleets, just a short warp journey past proud Anvilus. In the past, it was a small haven of humanity that had endured the horrors of old night. It survived by sacrificing what it must and taking what it could. Its small but efficient void navy laid waste to neighboring star systems to sustain its people, thriving on plunder and slaves. So effective was this strategy that by the time the first Imperial scout ships reached its borders, Anaktor was not merely surviving but flourishing. So confident were its people in their minor glory and meager strength that they met those first Imperial scout ships with fire and thunder. The first to receive word of this attack was a host of the Blood Angels led by Sanguinius himself, with 12 companies of his sons standing ready. Already engaged in an augur sweep of the nearby sectors, Sanguinius ordered their course diverted to Anaktor, and the fleet was arrayed in attack formation. They broke through the void with gun ports open and cannon primed. In a brief, brutal engagement, they shattered the enemy fleet awaiting them. The marauder craft of Anaktor were no match for the brute battleships of the Blood Angels. In short order, the 9th Legion pushed on to the first inhabited body in the system, encircling it with an iron cordon and lighting up the sky with the immense firepower of their cannon. A small, airless orb, Anaktor Extremis, housed a garrison of Anaktoran soldiers in subsurface habitats, their presence revealed only by the guns that dotted the sky above them. With no civilian presence to worry about, Sanguinius ordered an immediate assault to deny the enemy time to regroup. He committed the 19th, 67th, 171st and 94th Companies to the attack. A brief but precise bombardment cracked the surface and shattered the defenders' guns, clearing a path for the drop pods and assault craft that followed. Brutal close-quarters combat ensued in the cold subsurface halls of Anaktor Extremis as the Blood Angels carved a bloody path through the enemy. The foes they encountered were heavily cybernetically augmented, barely recognizable as human, and dubbed Iron Bulls by the Imperium's troops due to the sensory horns grafted to their skulls. Known among their own people as the Kusariku, they wielded primitive plasma casters and grav lances, holding against the 9th Legion for 6 solar hours. Each intersection of the labyrinthine tunnels was fiercely contested with tenacious courage and skill. The same story of fire and blood played out across the desolate outer worlds of the system. The Blood Angels relentlessly harried the enemy, who resisted valiantly, fighting to the bitter end at every outpost and imposing a high cost on the 9th Legion for each world conquered. Amid the asteroid fortresses of the system's outer belt, the Iron Bulls staged ambushes and feigned retreats, drawing the 9th Legionaries into craters rigged with blasting charges, sacrificing themselves to impede the Legion's advance. On Anaktor Median, the gateway to the inner system, the Iron Bulls drew a line with their own bodies, fighting a sprawling battle across 50 kilometers of shallow acidic sea and rocky archipelagos. They rode great, multi-legged augmetic frames like mounts into battle, stalling the advance of 9 Blood Angels companies. The 9th Legion warriors came to admire the courage of their foes and took great pride in the victories won against them. Sanguinius himself ordered a 6-hour ceasefire to honor the enemy's valor and sacrifice. Though the Anaktorans refused all attempts at direct communication, the winged Primarch wished to salute the warriors who had fought so bravely. Privately, he lamented the need for their destruction, hoping the pause, his ships arrayed in space just short of the system's throne world, would convince the Anaktoran leadership to bow before the Emperor and unite their strength with the Imperium. However, what followed shattered any hope and ignited the full and terrible wrath of the great angel. Advancing under a flag of truce, several Anaktoran craft approached the Blood Angel's flagship Red Terra. These wallowing transport barges signaled in the obtuse language of Anaktor that they bore gifts for the Primarch. Scans revealed no targeting or aberrant energy readings until the moment the first barge erupted in flame. 132 Blood Angels perished in the explosion that tore through the fleet, doubling the Legion's casualties in the campaign. 3 cruisers suffered significant damage, and one, the Inculcator, was gutted and left aflame from stem to stern, damaged so severely it would later be abandoned. Betrayed and grieving for his lost sons, Sanguinius unleashed his full fury, calling for a day of revelation to exact retribution on Anaktor and avenge the wrongs done to his legion. The people of Anaktor had proven themselves unworthy of the Imperium and the great angel's respect or mercy. Surging forward, the Blood Angel's vessels blasted a bloody path through the inner system, annihilating the remaining squadrons of Anaktor's defense fleet and raining nuclear fire onto every isolated outpost, leaving only ashes and fields of glass. The Anaktoran response was desperate, shielding military targets with civilian populations, launching suicide runs with more fireships, and attempting further ambushes. All failed in the face of the Blood Angels' unleashed fury. Their ships surrounded Anaktor Centralis, a brutal constellation of lights in the night sky. There they waited while below, the Iron Bulls manned defences, herding their people to form shields around gun platforms and fortresses as the Blood Angels watched. Then, as dawn's purple haze coloured the horizon, the Blood Angels descended from the sky, led by a host of the silver-masked Erelim, the Order of the Angels' Tears, who served as the Blood Angels' destroyers. Their target was the single largest force of Iron Bulls marshalling in defence of their throne world, aiming to cut the heart from the enemy in one decisive strike. Like meteors, the drop pods smashed into the Iron Bulls' lines, some opening like lethal flowers to reveal missile pods that spat flame and death, while others disgorged crimson-clad killers with roaring bolters. With the enemy's formation broken and its soldiers in disarray, the main force of the 9th Legion descended on fiery contrails, alighting at the battle's frenzied centre and throwing themselves into the fray without hesitation. What had begun as a battle swiftly transformed into a rout and then into a massacre as the Blood Angels pierced the heart of the enemy formation and slew their command echelon, plunging the Iron Bulls into chaos. Without pausing to regroup or resupply, the Blood Angels drove forward relentlessly, pushing the enemy before them, their sorrow concealed by the ornate masks of their order, and bound by the oaths they had sworn. The Erelim and their brothers swept across the planet like a crimson tide. Anyone who raised arms against them was slaughtered, for this was not a battle, not a matching of wits and blades in honest combat, but a massacre. The Blood Angels unleashed devices and munitions that Sanguinius rarely sanctioned, the terror of phosphex and the invidious curse of rad weapons. Cities became charnel fields of broken corpses, forests and fields turned to cinders and ash, and fortresses became open, blackened wounds. Anaktor Centralis was not conquered, but ruined. No soldier was left alive, no stone left upon another, and those of its people who survived the fighting were condemned to labour in the belly of the Legion's ships or distant manufactoria. Thus ended the fighting on Anaktor, a bloody tribute to the terrible rage that still festered in the heart of the 9th Legion even after its unification with its Primarch. The last of the Iron Bulls fell at the hand of Sanguinius himself, who cut a path into the palace of that system's petty ruler alone, accompanied only by a small cadre of his sanguinary guard. As they deployed, the last of the Iron Bulls, encased in huge horned exoskeletal suits of rippling synthetic muscle and wielding great diamond-toothed chain blades, sought to bar the great angel from his prize. But the Primarch was more than a match for such clumsy engines of war. Borne through the air on white wings, now spattered with blood and gore, he swooped upon the ungainly suits, cleaving them apart or plucking them from the ground, only to release them in a fatal plummet, swiftly clearing his path to the throne room. There, the great angel dragged the quivering lordling from his throne and brought him forth to witness the ruin of his kingdom, the wrath of the emperor, and the price of his own treachery. At the zenith of the Great Crusade, a myriad of worlds were united under the banner of the Imperium, with countless billions of soldiers fighting in the emperor's name, creating legends that would endure for millennia. Among these legends, the Legiones Astartes stood tallest, each a beacon of martial excellence lighting the way for the mortal armies that followed. Some legions, however, captured the spirit of the Great Crusade more than others. Sanguinius's Blood Angels were among this esteemed group. Their rapid advances, the spectacle of their assaults, and the awe their presence inspired made them favoured subjects of the remembrancers who followed the fleets. They fought noble campaigns, unleashed against the most vile creatures hiding in the void, and were tasked with liberating those under the yoke of alien oppression. They slew monsters and secured distant human worlds, appearing to those they freed as true angels descending from the heavens. Among their transhuman kin, the Blood Angels also garnered great acclaim, partly due to the campaigns fought alongside them in past years, their skill at arms on the battlefield, and the magnanimous nature of their warriors. Much of their reputation and goodwill, however, stemmed from the noble demeanour of the angel himself. For among all the Emperor's Primarchs, Sanguinius was the most beloved and admired. The Emperor's sons were often a fractious brotherhood, many harbouring grudges or rivalries. Sanguinius, however, was perhaps the most respected and admired. for he saw none of his brothers as lesser, and met each with an open warmth that even calmed the rage of his grim brother Angron. Only Horus was held in higher regard, though his colder demeanour and brooding aspect made him more aloof than the winged Primarch. Sanguinius was welcome in courts across the galaxy, from the exotic thrones of distant colonies to the baroque nexus chambers of the Mechanicum's far-flung realms. He embodied the pride and optimism of those golden years, when it seemed that nothing could stand against the Emperor's armies and the galaxy lay open for their conquest. The Ullanor Crusade was to be the ultimate proof of that destiny, a grand campaign to shatter the greatest remaining rival to mankind's dominance, the Orcish Empire of Urlach-Urg. Here, Horus would break that foe in the largest battle of the Great Crusade, securing a grand victory. Yet, even after that accomplishment, at the triumph of Ullanor that followed, many expected Sanguinius, who had not been present for the fighting, to receive the laurels of the new rank of War Master as the Emperor retired to Terra. Such was the reputation and glamour of the great angel and his warriors, now seen as peerless scholars and warriors, that few doubted Sanguinius's worthiness to act as the Emperor's proxy, though some succumbed to petty jealousy. This was the pinnacle of glory for the Blood Angels and their sire, a peak they would stand upon only briefly before their fall, which would shake the very foundations of the Imperium. Just as the Emperor's dreams seemed on the verge of fulfillment, the Great Crusade met its most horrific and unimaginable end. The Imperial War Master Horus, the Emperor's greatest genetic son, succumbed to the temptations of the Chaos Gods and their promises of power. Naturally, he sought to sway his brother Primarchs to join his cause. Horus and Sanguinius had fought alongside each other in many campaigns. Their relationship was so close that it occasionally incited jealousy among their brother Primarchs. However, Horus knew in his now corrupted heart that Sanguinius would never willingly betray their father. Thus he devised an audacious plan to either convert the Blood Angels' legion to his cause or utterly destroy them. Decades earlier, during a xenocidal campaign on the world of Melchior, Horus had discovered a carefully guarded secret of the Blood Angels. He had found his brother Primarch in a sunken ruin of an alien chapel, witnessing the unthinkable, Sanguinius murdering one of his own Astartes. Bewildered, Horus listened as Sanguinius explained his actions. He had discovered a trait within his own genome, lying dormant and waiting to be awakened. This genetic flaw would later be known as the Red Thirst. Sanguinius had been aware of this flaw for several years, keeping the truth from the Emperor and his fellow Primarchs. Some of the Angel's sons knew a measure of the truth, but only Azkaelon, First Captain Raldoron, the 9th Legion's Master Apothecary who remained on Baal, and a few others fully understood the extent of this affliction. They were united with Sanguinius in seeking a way to repair this flaw, always referred to as the Flaw. Horus swore to his brother that he would never reveal this matter to anyone, not even their father, for as long as Sanguinius wished. The angel was touched by his brother's gesture and expressed his gratitude. Horus solemnly vowed to help Sanguinius deal with the matter, no matter how long it took. Little did they know that one day a corrupted Horus would exploit this knowledge and attempt to turn the Blood Angel's flaw against them. Decades later, Horus exploited his knowledge of the Blood Angel's genetic flaw. Believing he had found a way to sway his beloved brother's legion to his cause and the service of the Chaos Gods, the War Master put his plan into motion. As Imperial War Master, Horus ordered Sanguinius to gather his entire legion and head to the Signis cluster, a triple-star system in the Ultima Segmentum near the eastern fringe. The 9th Legion's mission was to cleanse the 7 worlds and 15 moons of the Signis cluster of Xenos invaders known as the Nephilim and liberate the human settlers from their Xenos overlords. This would later be known as the Signis campaign. To further entice Sanguinius, Horus claimed he had discovered a way for the Blood Angels to rid themselves of their inner darkness and eliminate the flaw. Horus promised Sanguinius that if he obeyed this command, the Blood Angels would find a new freedom. Sanguinius had no reason to doubt Horus, as their bond was as close as two brothers could be, often inciting jealousy among their fellow Primarchs. Eager to prove the value of their bond once more, Sanguinius followed his brother's directive without hesitation, setting out for the volatile region of space. Unbeknownst to the Blood Angels, they were walking into a deadly trap. The Signis cluster had already fallen to the agents of the ruinous powers, becoming a realm of chaos in real space, a system of hellish demon worlds ruled by a greater demon of Slaanesh named Kiburan the Perverse. Upon the Blood Angels' arrival, their fleet was ambushed by the malevolent demonic forces of the Warp, crippling or killing many of their navigators and astropaths in the initial attack. For the first time, the Blood Angels faced the true fury of chaos. Kiburan projected an image of himself to Sanguinius, proclaiming his dominion over the system in Slaanesh's name and taunting the Primarch to take it back. Despite having never faced such a foe, the Blood Angels prepared their counterattack, confident in their eventual victory. Rising to Kiburan's challenge, the Blood Angels Legion launched a series of assaults on the demon stronghold, the world of Signis Prime. During the battle on Signis Prime, Sanguinius encountered a new horror, Kabanda, a greater demon of Khorne. In the ensuing clash, Sanguinius was gravely wounded and temporarily incapacitated. He watched helplessly as Kabanda, with a single swing of his colossal axe, massacred 500 of his sons. The psychic shockwave from the deaths of so many of his warriors rendered Sanguinius unconscious. With their Primarch fallen and their brethren slaughtered, the Blood Angels Legion was overcome by a black rage, driving them into a berserker fury. In their madness, they tore through the demonic horde, obliterating it. However, the brutal violence unleashed by Kabanda had awakened a dark thirst for blood and violence within the Space Marines, which would not be sated until every trace of chaos was eradicated from the planet. Meanwhile, the Blood Angels librarians, defying the edicts of the Council of Nicaea, used their psychic abilities to heal and revive their Primarch. Once Sanguinius regained consciousness, he confronted Kabanda again and defeated the Bloodthirster. Even the formidable Kiburan was banished back to the Imperium by Sanguinius. It was only when the planet was completely purged of chaos that the rage of the Blood Angels finally abated. Though Signis had been liberated from the forces of chaos, the price of victory was far greater than anyone could have anticipated. The strange berserker rage the Blood Angels had experienced left a brooding shadow on their souls, which would manifest in the centuries to come as the great curse known as the Black Rage, afflicting the Blood Angels and their successors. Following the conclusion of this long and arduous campaign, the Blood Angels attempted a warp jump towards Terra. Despite the impassable ruin storm conjured by the word-bearers during the Battle of Calth, the fleet's navigators detected a shining beacon, which they initially believed to be the Astronomicon. Desperate, the Ninth Fleet's navigators followed it. Sensing safe harbor, the fleet immediately executed a warp translation back into real space. However, when they exited the warp, they found themselves hundreds of light-years off course, far from their intended destination. This detour was no accident, as Sanguinius had ordered his navigators to target the strongest telepathic signal. Inadvertently, they had detected the beacon of an alien artifact known as the Pharos on the distant world of Sotha. Unknowingly, the Blood Angels had traversed the galaxy and ended up in the realms of Ultramar. They were soon approached by a skirmish line of unidentified starships. The bright cobalt-blue vessels, trimmed with white and gold, hailed them. The Blood Angels were greeted by Rebirth master of the 13th Legion, who welcomed his brother Primarch to the 500 worlds of Ultramar. With the Imperium severed into two halves, isolated by the ruin storm, the light of the Astronomicon was no longer visible from Ultramar, and no word from the Emperor had been heard for several years. Guilliman declared the foundation of Imperium Secundus to continue the fight against the traitors and uphold the Emperor's great work. Upon the Blood Angels' arrival at Ultramar, after escaping the Signis cluster, Guilliman proclaimed Sanguinius as the rightful heir to the Emperor. Shortly after, the Dark Angels also followed the Pharaoh's guiding beacon and arrived in the 500 worlds. Lion L. Johnson was declared the Lord Protector of the realm and Supreme Commander of all its military forces, a title equivalent to War Master. The foundation of Imperium Secundus was marred when the Night Lord's Primarch Conrad Kurz, who had been hiding within the bowels of the Dark Angel's flagship, escaped from the Invincible Reason and rampaged across Macragge, spreading terror and chaos. Eventually, both Guilliman and the Lion confronted Kurz. Their attempt to kill him was unsuccessful, as Kurz had laid a cunning trap. He brought down an entire chapel on the two Primarchs using planted explosives and fled. Guilliman and the Lion were saved through the direct intervention of the loyalist Iron Warrior's warsmith Barabbas d'Antioch, who was communicating with Guilliman at the time of the attack via a portal opened by the Pharaohs. Acting on instinct, d'Antioch reached through the portal and pulled the two Primarchs to safety on Sotha. Continuing his relentless pursuit of the elusive Night Haunter over the next 2 years, the Lion frequently clashed with Guilliman over various policies, particularly concerning the security of Imperium Secundus and the handling of rebels on Macragge. The Lion was convinced that Kurz was behind the unrest. After a suicide bombing targeted an Astartes convoy, the Lion imposed martial law on Macragge using the Ist Legion. Believing Kurz was hiding within the rebellious Illyrium region, the Lion proposed a massive orbital saturation bombardment to ensure Kurz's death. Faced with opposition from both Emperor Sanguinius and Guilliman, the Lion instead deployed his legion's Dreadwing to flush out Kurz and the rebels. During an assault on the city of Alma Mons, the Lion finally cornered the Night Lord's Primarch, leading to a brutal confrontation. After a fierce battle, the Lion emerged victorious and questioned Kurz about his betrayal of the Emperor. Kurz's only reply was, "Why not?" He elaborated that a monster in his head drove his actions, one he could not control. Despite having Kurz at his mercy, the Lion couldn't bring himself to kill his brother and instead severely beat him again. The Lion tore Kurz's backpack from his battle plate, lifted him over his head and brutally brought him down across his knee, breaking Kurz's spine and paralyzing him. The Lion then presented the grievously wounded Kurz before Sanguinius and Guilliman to stand trial. A triumvirate was later convened where Kurz defended his actions but refused to admit any guilt. He argued that since each Primarch had been created to fulfill a specific role, he was simply acting according to his nature and had therefore committed no crimes. Kurz further sowed discord between Guilliman and the Lion by accusing the latter of secretly ordering orbital bombardments in direct violation of Guilliman's orders. Infuriated, the Lion attempted to kill Kurz, but was stopped by Sanguinius's words. In a dramatic gesture, Guilliman seized L. Johnson's lion sword and broke the blade across his armoured thigh. Furious, L. Johnson faced Sanguinius, who dismissed him and ended the triumvirate. Consequently, the Lion was banished from Imperium Secundus. Hours later, the Lion and the Dark Angels departed from Macragge. Standing in the chamber of the Tuchulka engine aboard the Invincible Reason, the Lion brooded over recent events, questioning his actions over the past decades and many decisions he had come to regret. As the Dark Angels prepared to return to Caliban, the Lion returned to the Tuchulka engine's chamber. He ordered the device to teleport himself and Holgin, the Deathbringer and voted lieutenant of the Deathwing, back to Macragge. As Sanguinius was about to execute Kurz for his crimes, the Lion and his lieutenant teleported directly into the chamber, urging Sanguinius to halt the execution. As troops demanded the Lion's surrender, L. Johnson explained his reasons for the intrusion. He argued that Kurz's ability to see precognitive visions of potential futures, including his own death at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor, was proof that the Emperor was still alive. Sanguinius recognized the truth in the Lion's explanation, as he too had precognitive visions of his inevitable death at the hands of the War Master. When Guilliman demanded to know Kurz's fate, the Lion knelt before his brothers and promised to serve as Kurz's jailer. If the Great Crusade was mankind's finest hour, the Horus heresy was undoubtedly its darkest. Brother fought brother with no mercy offered or given. Heroes fell, worlds burned, and the Emperor's dreams of peace were shattered forever. In this bleak period, the Blood Angels stood unwavering by the Emperor's side. Sanguinius stepped into the void left by Horus's betrayal, taking command of the Emperor's loyal forces. This thrust the Blood Angels into the most brutal conflicts. Their rivalry with the World Eaters escalated into bitter enmity as the legions now served different masters, resulting in some of the bloodiest battles of the war. It is said Horus hated and feared Sanguinius more than any of his brothers, and devised many plans to ensnare or kill him, all of which failed. Despite the might of the Emperor and the efforts of Sanguinius and the other loyalist primarchs, Horus's forces seemed unstoppable. Soon the Emperor found himself besieged within the Imperial Palace on Terra. Fortunately, the Blood Angels were present for the final titanic battle of the Horus heresy, the Siege of Terra. The Blood Angels, Imperial fists and white scars, defended the Imperial Palace with fervor. Sanguinius led the defense of the outer walls, repelling 3 major assaults by the War Master's troops. When Chaos Titans breached the wall, Sanguinius organized the retreat to the inner palace. At the Eternity Gate, the entrance to the Emperor's throne room, Sanguinius held the Chaos Horde at bay long enough for the wounded to be carried inside. As the last of the wounded were brought in, Sanguinius returned to the palace. Before the Eternity Gate could close, Kabanda, Archdemon of Khorne and Lord of all the Bloodthirsters, attacked him. The Angel and Greater Demon fought above the Imperial Palace, but Sanguinius, weary and taken by surprise, was cast down. Kabanda hovered above, laughing gutturally. However, Sanguinius was not dead. Regaining his senses, he took to the air, seized the demon's ankle, lifted it high and broke its back over his knee. He hurled the carcass at the Chaos Horde, who howled in fury as the Eternity Gate closed. When the imminent arrival of the Space Wolves, Dark Angels and Ultramarines legions forced Horus to gamble on a final battle with the Emperor, he lowered the void shields protecting his battle barge, the Vengeful Spirit. Sanguinius, Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists, and the Legio Custodes joined the Emperor in a daring teleport assault upon the vessel. Chaotic sorceries scattered the Loyalist strike force throughout the vessel. Only Space Marines could withstand the horrors of the demon-haunted starship, and even they were sorely pressed. Sanguinius was separated from his comrades and brought before the treacherous Horus. Possessing the psychic ability of foresight, Sanguinius likely knew he was going to his death. The Blood Angels have no doubt that loyalty brought him aboard. On the command deck, Horus offered Sanguinius a position of power if he renounced his loyalty to the Emperor. Sanguinius refused. Enraged, Horus attacked. Even at his peak, Sanguinius could not hope to prevail against the monstrous Horus, and he was already weary and wounded from his battles on Terra. Despite his grievous wounds, Sanguinius matched Horus's martial prowess, forcing Horus to resort to psychic methods. In his limitless malice, Horus ensured Sanguinius's death was the most painful and foul that his boundless evil could inflict. The War Master's psychic assault was so powerful that its echo still haunts Sanguinius's sons. When the Emperor finally entered Horus's sanctum, he found his rebellious War Master standing over Sanguinius's broken, bleeding corpse. In the battle that followed, the Emperor vanquished Horus, but was left near death. Many tales are told of this final battle, and though the exact facts are long lost, one detail remains. Despite the Emperor's great power, he could never have bested Horus had Sanguinius not created a chink in the War Master's armor. Because of this, the Blood Angels claim Sanguinius to be the greatest of the Primarchs,